Whenever there's chaos rising, look up because there's a warrior coming. An angel whose name alone strikes fear into the hearts of the wicked. Archangel Michael. But what if I told you he was not the greatest archangel? What if I told you he wasn't even created by God to be the greatest? So why did God create this one-of-a-kind super soldier? And what's the significance of his actions that we see recorded throughout Scripture? Welcome to our channel. Michael, meaning who is like God. In a war room meeting, Michael would be the guy you send in first, not just because he's strong enough to win, but because he has the heart of a lion, fierce, loyal, and obedient. Unlike Lucifer, whose name means light-bearer, he chose pride over submission. And so he led a third of the heavenly host in a revolt against the Almighty. The stage was set for war, and in the book of Revelation, John gives us a glimpse of the war in heaven. Michael and his angels battled against the dragon, that ancient serpent, Satan and his angels. Now some try to make this a symbolic war, but John uses language that makes it clear that this is not Star Wars weekend at the multiplex, but a theological rumble in the jungle between good and evil, and the outcome, a cosmic earthquake. The dragon and his angels are hurled down to the earth, leaving Michael victorious and humanity in the balance. You see, the real war began when the first human chose sin over holiness, and it will end only when the last human lays down their life for righteousness. And that war rages still in each one of our souls. We choose between light and darkness, between holiness and sin, between God and the flesh. And it's a war worth fighting because the prize is eternal. But it's not always easy to tell who's winning. Sometimes it seems that evil is winning. Sometimes it seems that good is winning. But here's the key truth. Neither side can win without your participation. So where do you stand? Michael and Moses. This supernatural showdown takes place not in the pages of a comic book, but in the book of Jude, verse 9. Michael and Satan are disputing over the body of Moses. Now, why is the archangel locked in a death struggle with the father of lies over the body of a dead prophet? Well, the obvious answer is that Moses' body was holy, and Satan wanted to defile it. But there's another compelling theory. You see, Moses disappeared after striking a rock in unbelief, and many believe that God kept Moses' body hidden so that Satan couldn't turn it into an idol that the people could worship. And the same reason Satan wanted the body was so he could block Moses' later appearance at the Transfiguration. Either way, the outcome is clear. Michael wins the victory, and Moses' body disappears. All we know is that the next time the prophet appeared, he was in the company of Elijah and Jesus. What does that say about Michael's fight? He doesn't fight with arrogance, but with divine authority. Look at his words to Satan, "The Lord rebuke you." In other words, I'm not fighting in my own strength. I'm fighting in the strength of the God you have rebelled against. Michael and Daniel. For 21 long days, Daniel prayed and fasted. But his prayers were not reaching God. Instead, they were being blocked by the prince of Persia. But then suddenly, as Daniel continued to pray, the prayers reached God, and Michael came to his rescue, breaking through the invisible barrier that was blocking his prayers. And if you think this is just a Bible story, consider that Christians today also experience delays in their prayers. Sometimes it may seem that God isn't listening, but more likely, there's a spiritual barrier blocking your prayers. And the best way to overcome that is to persist in prayer and ask the Lord of the harvest to send forth more laborers. Michael didn't save Daniel because he was great or powerful, but because he was obedient to the Father's will. The same is true for us. Prayer is not about our power, but about God's purpose. Michael and Israel. Twice in the book of Daniel, Michael is called your prince. And the reason for that, Israel is the prophetic clock of history, and Michael is its guardian. That means Michael is responsible for guarding God's people across the exile, through wars, and even into modern times. And the proof of that is the fact that God never allowed Israel to be wiped out, no matter how many enemies surrounded them. So if you're an Israeli, take heart, because God has not forgotten you. And he's using Michael to guard you still. Michael and the second coming. When Christ returns to earth, the voice of the archangel will sound. And that's not just the voice of a trumpet player, but the voice of victory. The war is over, and the righteous are resurrected. So don't fear when the armies of the world gather together to fight the battle of Armageddon, because Michael is calling in the reserves. Michael and Armageddon. And that brings us to the final showdown. At Armageddon, all the wars of the world will converge, and there Michael will be leading the heavenly host against the armies of the dragon. And when they meet, it will be a day of reckoning. For the wicked, it will be a day of judgment. For the righteous, it will be a day of vindication. You see, the war began in Eden, escalated in the wilderness, raged throughout history, and will culminate in the valley of Megiddo. But here's the key truth. Michael's mission is not to fight, but to execute judgment. He will judge the living and the dead. So if you're wondering about the significance of Michael, here's the lesson. Michael is the model of faithfulness, strength, and obedience. But the story is not about Michael. It's about the God who raised him up. In other words, the God who raised an angel to be the greatest warrior in history can and will raise you up to be a more than conqueror through Jesus Christ. Because the war is still on and God is still fighting, and you have a part to play. So stand firm,